Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome back to another instalment of Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're doing well out there. Now, one thing, just before we jump into our news stories for this week, one thing that I forgot to mention last week that I actually made a note to talk about because I thought it was quite cool, and I thought that you lot out there would find it quite interesting, but completely passed me by somehow, and I didn't realise until after I'd finished recording and started uploading and whatnot. And I tell you what, uploading last week's Ramble was a complete and utter ordeal. I don't know if those of you who watch on YouTube, of course this goes out on YouTube and also on the podcast platforms as well, but I don't know if those of you who watch on YouTube noticed, but it actually ended up going out about 12 hours late. Because basically I couldn't get it uploaded here at the studio. I started trying to upload it and it sat there at 1% forever, and I just gave up. And the internet's ridiculously fast here. Usually it takes a couple of minutes. So I gave up on it, and I had to upload it on ridiculously slow rural broadband overnight. But we got there in the end. That's the main thing. Anyway, yes. Last week's Ramble, there was something I was going to talk about that I completely forgot about. So let's dive into this before we take a look at our news stories for this week. So this is a musical called Nerds, the Bill Gates versus Steve Jobs musical comedy. And I actually went to see this with my wife a couple of weeks ago at the Curve Theatre in Leicester, which is our local theatre. Now, I'm not really into musicals or the theatre at all, to be honest. I've seen a few. I've seen... I don't need to get into the list, but if it's kind of a light-hearted comedy thing, I'll go along, and I generally end up having quite a nice time, I must say. But she's much more into kind of musicals and the theatre and stuff than I am. But obviously, this one, the subject matter was right up my street. So it's the story of the rivalry between Steve Jobs and Bill Gates in the 90s. Obviously, Apple and Microsoft, a huge rivalry at the time. And I will say that there was quite a lot of stuff in there. It's a story that I'm quite intimately familiar with, I will say. There was quite a lot of stuff in there that was actually surprisingly historically accurate, I will say. The kind of general gist of it and kind of how the story starts off and kind of progresses over time. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of artistic license in there. There's some strange things, some very strange things that I'm pretty sure don't have any kind of grounding in reality. But hey, it's comedy. And it was entertaining, and it had some quite amusing songs and things in it, particularly a rap battle between the two of them, where the Zune got a mention, which got a big laugh out of me. I think I was pretty much the only Zune fan in the audience, but there you go. But anyway, I was just going to say, it's a really small thing. I was just doing some Googling, and apparently this started off at the Edinburgh Fringe, as a thing, and it was only a very small production. It was on a very small stage. They, as far as like props and sets and things go, it was all very much a kind of DIY amateur thing. Very small cast as well, I think 8 people in total or something. But it was very entertaining, I will say. I did find a review of this in Time Out, of course, which is quite a well-known entertainment review website / magazine, and they gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And described it as undemanding but diverting. So there you go. And extremely lightweight musical based around a substantially made-up version of the complicated relationship that existed between tech titans Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of recommend it, I guess, if you want to have a look out for that. It is kind of touring and doing some kind of smaller venues and stuff around the country at the moment. And hey, go for a couple of drinks before, have a good laugh, and then, kind of make a day of it, make a night of it. It's a good day out. Just wanted to mention that and put it up on your radar if you're into that kind of thing. But with that out of the way, finally, a week late, I guess it's time to get into the stories for this week. But just before we continue, of course, we have to say a very quick thank you to our sponsor, PCBWay.com. Now, you will no doubt be aware of PCBWay. They have been in the PCB fabrication business for 11 years now. But did you know that they have also recently started offering some additional services, including 3D printing, injection molding, and sheet metal fabrication? So if any of those are a requirement for your next project, please do check out the link to PCBWay down in the description. And once again, a big thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring Reese Ramble. Rambles. So with that out of the way, let's get on with this ramble. Now, if you cast your mind back to last week's episode, you will no doubt remember the very first story that I featured, which was inspired by a video that had gone out on my main channel all about the new collaboration between Atari and Namco. It was a 3D printable version of the new CX40 joysticks in all of those wonderful new colorways, inspired by the ghosts, of course, from the Pac-Man game. And the creator of those had gotten in touch and let me know that it was a thing and that I'd kind of inspired it with my video, and I was more than happy to share it. Well, off the back of that, someone else has been in touch about a project of theirs. Now, I don't know if this is going to become a regular segment or what, but I took one look at this and I thought, you know what? That's amazing as well. So I'm going to talk about that one as well. This is Chris over in Australia, a really lovely chap based on our communications over email. And he has a YouTube channel himself called Tech Distractions. So I just wanted to give him a bit of a shout out. He's on 1,600 subscribers at the moment. He's done 45 videos, and I will confess I haven't really had much time to actually check out his videos in any detail. There is one that I've watched, which we will talk about in a moment. But you can just see from the subject matter here, we've got 80s CGA PCs, we've got laptops, we've got old graphics cards. This is very much up our street, isn't it? So I will link to this down in the description. And if you're looking to check out a fresh new YouTube channel just on its way up the ladder, then I'm more than happy to give it a bit of a shout out. But of course, he contacted me about a specific project, and there is a video on this, which we will take a look at in a second. But this is a game that he's actually created, and it's a CGA game for those old 80s XT class PCs. So I will allow him to explain in his own words. 99 Things is a small find a thing game where you look for things in puzzle squares and try to complete the puzzle as quickly as possible. Or not. The game has been designed to use CGA graphics, 320 by 200 in 4 colours. While it targets MS-DOS-based computers from the 1980s, it can run in DOSBox 2. It is released as public domain/open source and was written in Quick Basic 4.5. How amazing is that? Now, it goes on to explain the different game modes and things, and also you can play it in your browser as well if you want to check out this game, but you don't want to download it and put it on a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk or whatever, or your Gotek or whatever device you might be using to transfer stuff to your old PC. But look at this. Doesn't this look absolutely wonderful? I mean, we've got, it's got a full menu system. The game's all fully customizable. And it's a fun little game. So he did put a video up about it on his channel. 99 Things, a 2025 MS-DOS game for IBM PCs with CGA graphics, with Quick Basic 4.5 source. I will remind you that this is an open source project. So if you want to download that and have a poke around yourself in Quick Basic, you certainly can. I think maybe Snorkers might be interested in that. That's kind of his kind of thing, isn't it? And it goes on to demo the gameplay. Also, it talks a little bit about the CGA colour palette, of course, and how it all works, which is really nice to kind of see the technical information behind it as well. And there's a bit of a demo about how the game works. As I say, find a thing. The concept is quite simple once you see it in action, but I highly urge you to go and check this out yourself. It will be linked in the usual places, and thank you ever so much, Chris, for sending this over to me, and also for making me aware of your YouTube channel, because it does seem like very much my kind of thing. Now, if you've been a long-term viewer of my YouTube output over on my main channel, Control-Alt-Reese, that's the second shout-out for my main channel this week, you will no doubt remember a video that I made 4 years ago. I've literally just checked this, and I can't believe it was so long ago. But yeah, if you were around back in those days watching my videos, firstly, thank you ever so much for sticking with me for so long. But I made a video all about this, and I do actually have it to hand, so I'm going to show it to you because I like showing this thing off as much as I can. I like to flex on people, particularly Atari fans. This is an Atari Sparrow prototype motherboard. It's a real one, and this came from Atari, and there's not many of these left at all. I think there's like 26 known to exist in total. As you can see, mine's in a particularly bad state. And if we just take a quick look at that video as well, just because it quite amused me. This is the video, Atari Sparrow FX1 prototype motherboard. So the FX1 was kind of the other code name for the project. And I'm not sure who this guy is. Looks nothing like me, does he? Yeah, I think the longer hair and the beard was definitely a good call. But anyway, this is also in my old studio as well. It's in my old spare room, which has now been converted into a craft room. for the other half. But yeah, anyway, in this video, I kind of explored this thing, talked about the story behind it, how I got my hands on it, and then had a bit of a poke around it. And I also did quite a lot of work in the background to identify the components that had been stripped off the board, and talked about perhaps trying to get hold of some of those and perhaps trying to restore it. I mean, I did get hold of a suitable CPU, 68030 CPU, and the RAM board for it, and then I pretty much stopped at that. To be honest, I came to the conclusion, as you can probably see, I didn't actually do anything with it at all other than that. To be honest, I came to the conclusion that, it's going to be a massive job to fix it. If I do get it working, it's a prototype. There isn't really any software for it, so it would be pretty much useless. And actually, in its current state, it does tell a bit more of an interesting story, a story that I did tell in that video, but essentially, Atari cannibalized this for parts for other prototypes, is essentially why it ended up in the state that it's in. But anyway, so of course the Sparrow, if you're not aware, if you're not familiar with Atari history, the Atari ST was of course released in 1985, 68,000 CPU, and of course a machine that's very dear to my heart, one that I talk about quite a lot. But in the early 90s, Atari decided to completely overhaul it and release a much improved and expanded version, which they ended up calling the Falcon030. And it used a 68030 CPU. It had much improved graphics and audio capabilities, particularly on the audio side, and it had an internal hard drive and stuff like that, obviously bringing the whole thing up to date. Unfortunately, Atari was in the process of imploding at the time, and quite a few did go out the door, and it did end up becoming quite big in the music world, obviously, which was a trend that was kind of started by the ST. And then there was another company called C-Lab in Germany that ended up buying the rights to it and manufacturing them themselves for a while. I think they made a rack mount version for musicians. And the whole thing's a really interesting story, very interesting piece of history. But yeah, why am I talking about the Atari Falcon? Well, it turns out, and there's quite an interesting link here as well to this particular board. It turns out that Wiztronics, who are an Atari started off as an Atari kind of service and repair service, and particularly supporting people in the music industry and stuff like that, based over in New York, are making a brand new version of the Atari Falcon, which is detailed on their website over here. And I say detailed, there isn't a huge amount of information here, but it does look like a very cool project, and they are making some excellent progress on it. And the reason I say there's a link to this board is because Wiztronics actually bought up a lot of Falcon stuff, a lot of prototype-related stuff from Atari when they went bust in the kind of mid-90s. And I actually bought this board from them 4 years ago. So, yeah, we have kind of come full circle on that. They are very much kind of specialists on this machine. And they've decided to produce their own improved and expanded version of the Atari Falcon. So there's details here. Obviously, they've got their first prototype here. It supports the Motorola 68030, of course, which was the CPU used in the original Falcon. We've got compatible TTO30 compatible SD-RAM up to 512 megabytes, which is quite impressive. Dual floppy support, cartridge support. It keeps all of the standard Atari ports as long as the custom ICs are available. And, they're re-implementing all the GAL chips and stuff. That's one of the reasons I actually didn't go down the route of rebuilding this, was because those original GAL chips and stuff are very, very hard to come by. So they're actually recreating their own versions, which is cool. And also they have added an ISA-bus to it as well for expansion, which is very cool. And so their third revision, they've added some other bits and pieces, 68060 CPUs, which of course was quite a popular upgrade for those machines back in the day. It has a USB interface for mice and keyboards. They've got to the point where they re-implemented all that GAL logic and stuff. And their final product, which they are working on, is going to be shipped in a rather nice custom aluminium enclosure. I guess aluminum, as they are based over in New York. And they're going to be releasing the schematics for it as well, so it can be quite easily serviced, which is really nice. The whole right to repair type stuff, which is all very important. And here is a picture of their prototype motherboard. So it's not a million miles away from the Falcon motherboard, but it does have some added expansion options and things, some expansion slots and some VME connectors and stuff. Of course, it's got all the familiar ports, if you are familiar with that machine, including the original joystick ports. There were actually some games released for that machine, not many. And to be honest, they won't go down in history as being particularly noteworthy, but there were games, as you might expect, being an Atari machine. And one thing that they are doing is working on a kind of a modular sound chip system as well. So you can actually upgrade the audio board in this and kind of have it as a modular, upgradable, interchangeable thing, which, of course, again, aimed at musicians, makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, and of course, it has MIDI as well. I have to mention that. So I think this is a really cool project. I think it's probably has a very limited market, if I'm honest, but secondhand Falcons, because Atari didn't make them for all that long, and because they are still quite desirable in that market, they can sell for, £2,000 plus. I mean, $3,000 plus. I think it mentions on this website to get hold of a a nice one in a box and stuff that's still complete and working and not completely trashed. So a very useful thing. Obviously, there is some demand out there for these machines. I always wanted one for my collection. The closest I could get was this prototype motherboard, which, believe it or not, actually cost about a tenth of what Falcons were selling for at the time. I have no idea why nobody else kind of jumped on this when it popped up on eBay, but there you go. But it's so cool to see this iconic old machine being recreated for the 21st century. And there is an update from last month, the 21st, and they are currently reworking their PCBs a bit based on some issues that they've run into. And they're also talking about the cost of manufacturing these. They're trying to keep the price down as much as possible, given that this is going to be a very low volume project. Anyway, yeah, so they are talking about perhaps making some of their prototypes available for people to start to experiment with and stuff like that. But cool little project, this. Very cool project. And of course, this will be linked in the usual places if you want to go and check out their website. There isn't a huge amount of information on there at the moment, but there are some very nice pictures and things. And of course, if you bookmark this and check back in every so often, you can keep up with their progress. So, really cool to see. Cool to see the Falcon coming back. If you're a regular here, you are no doubt well aware by now that I am a huge fan of id Software's 1993 first-person shooter that goes by the name of Doom. And, yep, it's time to point out the Doom shrine behind me once more, my collection of original Doom-related stuff. I'm very, very fond of it, very proud of that. And of course, it has to get a mention in pretty much every single ramble, but Doom was a game that was massively influential on me and kind of set me up for this lifetime love of first-person shooters and things. It's something I talked about in quite a lot of detail last week, so I'm not going to go over all of that again. But obviously, hopefully you're well aware that I am a huge fan of the game. And speaking of things that I am a huge fan of course, Night Dive, a wonderful company that has done all sorts of amazing remasters in recent years. Remasters of particularly some id Software games. So they did, of course, they did Doom. They've done Quake and Quake 2, which I enjoyed very, very much. System Shock they did, obviously not an id Software game. And Dark Forces, another one of my favourite first-person shooters as well, which I have talked about at length. And indeed, Night Dive is owned by Atari, so bit of a link to my previous story as well. Isn't that nice? Anyway, of course, it's QuakeCon time, named after id Software's 1996 first-person shooter, Quake. And QuakeCon, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a yearly convention to do with, it started off as a Quake thing, but has very much kind of expanded into id Software stuff. So, they talk about, id Software history, their current projects, their past and future projects, that kind of thing. Have staff members there doing talks on things, and the thing has become absolutely huge. There's also kind of a big LAN party attached to it as well, where people go and play death matches and stuff. And it's, all round a good time. It's over in Dallas, Texas, and it's happening right now. And as has become a bit of a recent tradition from QuakeCon, Night Dive has released, and this was a surprise release, nobody saw it coming, but Night Dive has released a brand spanking new remaster of an id Software game. And the really cool thing about this is that if you already own this game on Steam, as per their previous releases, you actually get the remaster for free, which is so cool because I am very much going to be checking this out. So the game in question, or shall I say games in question, because there's actually two, although they are quite closely related. I think most people would generally lump these in together. are Heretic and Hexen, as you might expect. Of course, they were spin-offs of the Doom engine back in the day, not developed by id Software themselves, but published by them. And of course, they had quite a heavy hand in the technical side of it as well. But they were actually developed by a company called Raven, who are well known for their excellent games back in the day and for working quite closely with id on a lot of quite exciting stuff. And Heretic and Hexen, if you are not familiar with them, are kind of these medieval, kind of magic-themed FPSs. Very much, at first glance on the surface, visually, I would say quite similar to Doom, of course, running on the Doom engine. But actually, once you get into them, they have quite a lot of depth to them, and they're quite different games, and well worth checking out if you haven't checked them out, because, as I said, you've got magic, you've got potions, you've got these fantastical weapons and things. And the level design and stuff is quite kind of complex, quite kind of fantasy themed. Anyway, you've got an opportunity to go and check these out. You don't need me to describe what Heretic and Hexen are. But yeah, this story over on Engadget by Ian Carlos Campbell. Heretic and Hexen have received a surprise remaster from Night Dive Studios. The games are bundled with new levels and cross-platform multiplayer support. So, yes, new episode as well. That's the thing that I forgot to mention, of course, which Night Dive have become quite well known for with their remasters, and always very well received as well. Always very polished and proper top-notch new content, and very much kind of in the same vein as the original content as well. It does slot in quite nicely. There was a Machine Games episode that they did for, they worked with Machine Games on an episode for Quake, I believe, and I'm just trying to remember this off the top of my head. There was certainly one for Doom as well. But anyway, Night Dive Studios and id Software have announced a surprise remaster of fantasy shooters Heretic and Hexen. The games are now available for modern consoles in a new release dubbed Heretic plus Hexen. That includes support for co-op, cross-platform multiplayer, and community-published mods. Heretic and Hexen combines Heretic, Shadow of the Serpent Riders, Hexen, Beyond Heretic, and Hexen, Death Kings of the Dark Citadel into a single bundle. So this was a series of games, I should say. On top of making but they haven't done Hexen 2 yet, which was apparently a third-person shooter. I've never actually played it, but I did see some footage of it earlier and thought it looked quite cool. But perhaps that's their next project, who knows. Anyway, on top of making the updates necessary to get the games running on Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch, Night Dive also created 2 brand new episodes to play through called Heretic, Faith Renewed, and Hexen, Vestiges of Grandeur, which is a wonderful name, that include new levels inspired by the original games. So when they were first released in 1994 and 95 respectively, Heretic and Hexen featured the novel pairing of Doom-inspired first-person action with rudimentary RPG elements like character classes and an inventory. The games helped put developer Raven Software on the map not long before it went on to create games like Quake 4 and Wolfenstein for id Software. Not the original Wolfenstein 3D, but the 90s FPS, which was quite cool, actually, from what I remember. Am I thinking of Return to Castle Wolfenstein? They all kind of blend into one. Anyway. So there we go, and the story goes on to talk a bit more about Night Dive's kind of previous work with id, but there is a video that popped up on my radar this morning, and I'm going to make this one of my videos of the week, so I'll just kind of briefly talk about it now. But this is from NoClip, who are quite well known, of course, in the FPS and the gaming space. And this is actually an exclusive interview with some of the people involved in this remaster of Heretic and Hexen. There's some great footage of the game in action, of course, of the remaster here, and some quite interesting information about the original games and what they're all about and that kind of stuff. And as mentioned, some interviews with some of the people involved in this remaster. So, yeah, quite cool little video, 13 minutes 38. I sat and watched this with great interest. Evidently, of course, as you might expect from Night Dive, they have done an absolutely wonderful job of this. They have made some tweaks and things to the gameplay, I will say, but actually, it does all make a lot of sense, the stuff that they've done, and of course, it is all in very much, in the same vein as those original games, if you are fans of those games. But it does certainly look like the ultimate way to enjoy these games. So I have played them. I did actually play them way back in the day. At some point in the late 90s, I do remember playing through these, and I've also played, I think it's Hexen, which was released on the Nintendo 64. I did check that out quite recently, actually. I think that was Hexen. So yeah, I'm certainly going to be playing these. I believe I already own them on Steam, so yeah, something to check out over the weekend. Remasters from Night Dive of Heretic and Hexen. those fantasy, medieval-themed, Doom-based games from Raven Software in the mid-90s. Definitely well worth checking out. It's very late on a Friday afternoon. I have had a rather jam-packed week of work this week, I must say. My brain is feeling pretty much fried. I've had so much stuff, so many balls in the air, so much stuff to juggle, and a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes at the studio here as well, which I need to talk about at some point. But nothing bad, nothing that's going to stop stop the videos flowing, but something quite disruptive. But given all those circumstances, hey, what better time to talk about a very complex and delicate topic like censorship, political censorship, censorship of games, and some quite heavy-handed tactics that have been happening in the past few weeks. I have held off on talking about this because it's kind of been a bit of a developing story over the past couple of weeks, and also because of like the controversial nature of it and whatnot. But hey, this is a gaming and computing podcast, and this is a very big thing that's happening in the world of gaming at the moment. And also someone did raise it over on my Discord server again this week. So let's talk about this. And I'm going to actually refer to this story over on Wired for this. This is an excellent kind of deep dive into this. I'm not going to sit here and read the entire thing because it is quite deep, like I say. But this is some of the best coverage I have seen of the situation. So the headline here is Steam and itch.io are pulling porn games. Critics say it's a slippery slope to more censorship. A conservative group is targeting payment processors as a weapon to get adult games de-indexed in storefronts. Even games that have nothing to do with sex or abuse have been caught in the dragnet. And I will say, I'll try not to go into too much graphic detail here. We'll talk about things in quite broad terms because I appreciate I do have quite a diverse range of viewers and listeners. But there are a lot of games on Steam that are kind of a very low quality shovelware stuff. A lot of AI generated stuff, and a lot of it is quite grubby and not. There's barely any gameplay there, and they kind of deal with some quite horrible things. And of course, they're the kind of games that have been targeted by this, as well as some games that perhaps don't meet that criteria, and some kind of lighter ones as well that perhaps have been caught up in this dragnet that didn't deserve to be. But of course, the focus of this conversation seems to have been, there's all these really horrible, nasty games that deal with all these horrible, things in terrible ways. You can look into it if you like, and of course, perhaps actually getting those removed isn't necessarily such a bad thing. Although, of course, that depends on your views on censorship. But then, as is inevitable with these things, it's a slippery slope, and there's a lot of stuff that's been caught up in it that perhaps shouldn't have been. And of course, now this has set a precedent. It is potentially now in a position to be used as a weapon against anything that this particular group happens to disagree with, which is the side that is quite concerning. So I certainly do see all sides of the debate. But anyway, the Wired story starts late in the evening on July the 23rd. Developers with games tagged as NSFW, not safe for work, on itch.io, a digital marketplace, began to notice something strange. Their work, whether it was a game about navigating disordered eating as a teenager or about wiener art, no longer appeared in search results. No notification or anything. It says former NYU Game Center educator and developer Robert Yang, whose work explores gay history and culture, just found out via Blue Sky. Itch.io is de-indexing or removing from its search index any and all adult NSFW games, regardless of why they've been tagged that way. Games are marked this way for a variety of reasons, whether it's due to sexual themes, discussions of mental health, or stories that otherwise involve triggering topics. On the itch.io site, founder Leif Corcoran said the sudden and disruptive move is the direct result of an ongoing campaign by Collective Shout, an organisation critics have alleged is anti-porn. The group has recently targeted payment processors for Itch and Steam, urging the banking services to stop doing business with those platforms because of the content they host, a tactic known as financial censorship. The move comes a week after Steam removed from its own storefront hundreds of adult titles allegedly containing instances of abuse, those topics I talked about, and which Collective Shout has claimed was a result of our campaign. On its site, Collective Shout refers to itself as a grassroots campaigns movement that protests the objectification and sexualization of women and girls. Now, there is a lot more to this, and there is some quite, I think, quite well-founded concern from, kind of LGBT groups and other kind of marginalized groups who some of these kind of super conservative groups, religious groups do kind of take issue with. Like I say, this is quite a heavy topic. And of course, well-founded concern that this tool is going to be used against them next. And ultimately, you go after the payment processors. These platforms can't actually take payment for these games. It's going to have a massive effect on their business, and they have no choice but to. Well, I say they have no choice. I guess they can say no, but it is a very heavy-handed tactic that does kind of hit their very existence, their very business model, quite kind of right where it hurts. So, yeah. But one thing that obviously I mentioned that this was raised on my Discord in the past week, and this was a link to another related story that kind of expands on this a little bit as well, because this is an angle that is kind of interest to classic and kind of retro gamers as well. And this is a story over on Games Radar that mentions Grand Theft Auto, Duke Nukem, and Saints Row. Now, yeah, of course, these games do have those kind of themes in them. And, they are tackled in kind of an 80s action movie, comedy, lighthearted. It is poking fun at that kind of culture and that kind of stuff, and kind of referencing, gangster films and all of that stuff. But quite rightly, these games are, they are potentially of concern. Duke Nukem, if you've played Duke Nukem 3D, it's got the dancers and stuff in it as well. Quite funny that obviously running around shooting people in the face and killing people is perfectly fine as long as you don't show any naked flesh, as always with these people. But yeah, this is I don't know if this is like a thinly veiled advertising thing for this service, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So this is a platform called Zoom, which I hadn't heard of, which apparently sells retro games like this. And they have apparently they have also come up on the radar of this group, and they are the ones that have kind of raised their concerns about these classic kind of retro games. One of our payment processors made us aware that a fellow member of the industry was concerned about our content, Zoom platform says in a statement. After we heard from the payment processor, we immediately engaged in lengthy discussions with both PayPal and Stripe. We worked with our contacts at the aforementioned payment processors to develop a tripartite solution. Blimey, that's a good word. To ensure the right to free speech and freedom of expression, as well as protect the safety of our valued customers and partners. So they've added in an opt-in for two-factor authentication and a wallet system, so people can add funds to their accounts. And obviously, this is to try to protect their customers from, nosy people looking into their transactions and their kind of their purchase history, and looking at the specific games that they have purchased. So trying to kind of fight censorship by protecting their users, I guess. But I must admit, when this first came up, obviously people were quite rightly talking about some of those trashier games getting removed, so-called games, and some of the kind of horrible content that some of those do deal with. And all right, there's an argument for that. There's a lot of overreach going on. There's stuff with other kind of adult themes that has been affected that perhaps does fall under the category of art and, shouldn't be censored by this group, certainly not in such a heavy-handed way. But I must admit, I hadn't even considered stuff like Duke Nukem 3D and Grand Theft Auto. Of course, lots of other games from that era, kind of dealing with those kind of themes and stuff, and how they might also come up on the radar. Now this group has had this big initial win. Are they going to start going after stuff like that? Are they going to go after anything and everything that they think is remotely inappropriate? It's a big topic. It needs to be discussed. It's an important conversation. I will say, I hate putting myself out there and giving my own opinions on these controversial topics, but I am, by and large, anti-censorship, I will say. I think it's kind of up to people to decide for themselves. That said, there is some kind of stuff that, even I think perhaps probably shouldn't exist, but complex subject, isn't it? Anyway, so this is the story from the past couple of weeks, which is very much an unfolding and developing thing. As you can probably see, I'm going back to the Wired article to look up the name of this group. There it is, Collective Shout, putting pressure on payment processors to in turn put processor on games platforms to remove games that this so-called conservative group find objectionable for their sexual themes. So, that's a thing. So, in recent weeks, I have been avidly following the story of an arcade down in Wiltshire called Highest Score, which, if you remember, announced that they were kind of on the brink of bankruptcy and that they were actually going to open for one last ditch weekend just to kind of see the place off. And this caught the attention of lots of retro podcasts and news, and it even made the mainstream news as well. And the community actually ended up rallying around that arcade, and a load of people showed up for that weekend, and also a load of people donated money online. And as I reported a couple of weeks ago, they actually announced that they'd made enough money now to kind of rescue the business, and that they were going to keep the doors open and they were going to keep trading, and that retro arcade was going to survive into the future, which is really cool to see. Certainly, at least in the kind of short to medium term. Hopefully that's kind of also given them the kick that they need to make it a long-term viable business. Oh, I will also say that this arcade was down in Salisbury, and I did question my pronunciation of Salisbury in that episode, which I did get some flack for, probably quite deservedly so as well. So yes, it is Salisbury down in Wiltshire. But yeah, unfortunately, this is a story that is kind of repeating itself across the country at the moment, and ultimately, high street stuff, retail stuff, any kind of in-person, destinations like these are struggling at the moment due to various political things that I'm not going to go into, business rates, and just the times that we live in. Times are tough. People don't have a lot of disposable income to spend on this kind of thing. But yes, sadly, there has been another one that has put out, a call for help. I guess a bit of a distress call this week. And ultimately, this first arcade, the Highest Score down in Salisbury, was kind of saved as a result of people raising awareness and people talking about it in the press, and people like me kind of sharing it as well. So I wanted to help raise some awareness of this one as well, particularly if it is local to you and perhaps you want to pop in. And also, this place looks absolutely incredible. So this is a story over on timeextension.com. And the headline here is, "I've put my entire heart and soul into creating this tribute to the past. Arcade blast from the past set to close." And this picture tells quite a story, doesn't it? Now, for those of you listening to this, I know quite a few of you listen on the podcast platforms as well, so I'll try to describe it as best I can. But this is like a 1970s living room. They've got the wonderful 70s style wooden cabinets and things. They've got the old gas. Is that a gas? I think that's an electric fireplace. Actually, the imitation gas electric fireplaces that were a big thing back in the day with the bricks around and the wonderful carpet. I think that our house actually had a carpet very similar to this. It's this wonderful red and black and cream kind of pattern. Horrible, noisy, busy carpet, as was the fashion back in the day. Some wonderful old pictures and an old lamp. And they've got Rock'em Sock'em robots and some old handheld games. They've got a NES hooked up to an old CRT TV. And this is actually part of this arcade. This is an area that you can actually go into and kind of play this old NES and get this kind of 70s experience. And as you can see from these photos, just kind of away from that, next to that, they've got pinball tables. They've got all the old arcade cabinets. I mean, we've got Galaxian, Pac-Man and Defender I can see in the photo here. I think that's a centipede next to that. Looks like a really awesome place, doesn't it? So sad to hear that they are kind of in trouble and they might not be around for much longer. So the owner of the Halifax arcade, Blast from the Past, has announced on Facebook that the location will close at the end of this month following a number of issues that has left him with no choice but to close up, including rising costs, a dramatic drop in footfall and difficult operating conditions. Located in Halifax's iconic Peace Hall, Blast from the Past was the brainchild of avid arcade fan Ryan Pearson, who set up the business in 2022. And was designed to be unlike other much larger arcades situated in the UK, offering a more unique and personal experience. So this is positioned on the Peace Hall's top floor, and not only can you play original retro consoles like the Mega Drive and Atari 2600, and of course those arcade machines and pinball machines as well, but it also has an impressive recreation of an actual living room featuring a CRT TV, a NES, and a bunch of decorations and artifacts to make you feel like you were really experiencing the games as they had been back in the day. So, this goes on to talk to Ryan Pearson, of course, the operator of this arcade. He seemed to indicate that the business had been negatively affected by the Peace Hall's gig season, which has forced the location to close early on multiple occasions to facilitate other events, and encourage locals to support the other independent businesses inside the Peace Hall. So I have to say, I have been to Halifax. I'm not familiar with this particular venue, but it sounds like the owners are putting on other events and stuff and kind of forcing the shops and other attractions there to close, which can't be good for business. And yeah, he's just kind of talking about the past 3 years in business. So I put my entire heart and soul into creating this tribute to the past, and I hope it's been just as special of a place to you all as it has been to me. I wanted to bring something different to Halifax, not only a true classic arcade with original machines, but a place that was incredibly welcoming and had all the bells and whistles to make you feel like a kid again, and to show the next generation of kids where video games all began and what other incredible things came out of the 70s and 80s. I've always given my all to the arcade to bring you the best experience possible, exactly how you remembered it being. No emulation, no flat screens, no replicas, no corners cut, just original 80s gaming fun. I'd say I successfully created a place not only unique to Halifax, but different to any arcade you've ever been to or ever will. So, the last day of operation will be August the 25th. And he has said that you can also book it for private hire as well up until that date. And obviously they've got general entry as well. You need to go and check out their Facebook page and stuff. I don't know if they have a website. It's not linked here. They just talk about Facebook. But yeah, if you want to go and see their opening hours. But you know, if you are local and you do want to pop in and show them your support, and hey, perhaps as per this other arcade that was saved in the past few weeks, you know, maybe if enough people show up, maybe, just maybe, might be able to kind of turn the tides on this one and prevent the rather regrettable, you know, disappearance of another one of these classic arcades. And one more very quick story just before we jump into the video of the week, or indeed videos of the week. There's something to whet your appetite. And something that I wasn't even aware existed. This popped up on my phone this morning in the newsfeed thingy, and I must admit I was quite surprised to discover that it was a thing. And I might actually make a video about this as well, just exploring it and seeing what it's all about before it disappears, because, well, it's quite relevant to some of the stuff that I've been doing recently. So, this is a story on 9to5google.com, and it's about Steam for Chromebook. So Steam, of course, Valve's big game marketplace, hopefully needs no introduction. You can, you know, fire it up on your PC and you can buy games. And of course, I've been experimenting with SteamOS-based stuff, that Linux-based stuff. They have that whole Linux compatibility layer that they did for the Steam Deck, which means you can play all those Windows games on Linux. In a lot of cases, actually better than the experience on Windows, which is really cool to see. But yeah, of course, ChromeOS is Linux-based. It is very kind of you know, minimalist and cut down. I think it's fair to say, of course, predominantly designed for online use. I've had some criticism in the past for not fully understanding what ChromeOS is all about, so apologies for that. But it is a minimalist Linux-based operating system released by Google to try to tie people into Google's online services and whatnot. And it's something I have been kind of experimenting with. But yeah, not really a gaming operating system, not something you would associate with gaming. You know, it's the kind of thing that they use in schools with these very low-cost laptops, you know, when they just need access to email and a web browser and, you know, the kind of Google suite of word processor and spreadsheet and stuff. But games? Yeah, so after debuting in 2022, the Steam for Chromebook beta will stop working in early 2026. At the time, it was a big ChromeOS effort, but there hasn't been an update in ages, reports 9to5Google. Entering Steam into the ChromeOS launcher starts the install process like before, but there's now an intermediary message. The Steam for Chromebook beta program will conclude on January the 1st, 2026. After this date, games installed as part of the beta will no longer be available to play on your device. We appreciate your participation in and contribution to learnings from the beta program, which will inform the future of Chromebook gaming. So yeah, at the time this was part of a sizable gaming push for ChromeOS. Steam joined Android apps and cloud streaming to provide a third way to play games on Chromebooks. Later in 2022, Google announced the first gaming Chromebooks. Gaming Chromebooks, I don't know. So yeah, Steam for Chromebooks launched in alpha that March before reaching beta in November with lower hardware requirements, Intel Core i3 and Ryzen 3 with 8GB of RAM. However, Ryzen 5 and 16GB is recommended, and it uses the Linux version of the game, so only supports games with officially released Linux versions. I don't believe this has Proton support based on the information that I've seen, but this is kind of why I want to experiment with this and dive into it and perhaps make a proper video about it. But Hey, if you're one of the, fraction of a percent of people out there who use a Chromebook, and you're one of the even smaller percentage of those who uses Steam on your Chromebook, unfortunately, this is quite sad news for you, because as of the end of this year, you won't be playing those Steam games on your Chromebook anymore. What a strange thing. It's always interesting to me when I discover these things that I was completely and utterly unaware of. So, yeah, that's a thing. And that, my dearest ramblers, brings us around quite neatly to my regular Video of the Week feature, wherein I feature a video, or indeed videos, that I have seen in the past week here on the old YouTubes that have entertained or inspired or enlightened me or otherwise improved my life in some small way. Quite often they are retro and vintage gaming and computing related. Quite often they aren't. Quite often there's one, and quite often there's more than one. But I'm very pleased to report once more this week that I have 3 videos for you, and they are all very much on topic for us. So without further ado, and it seems like I've covered quite a lot of stuff, and this one's going to be a longer ramble, so I'll try to be brief. Let's dive into these 3 videos, and of course they will be linked in the usual places, so you can go and check them out for yourself. Now, 2 of them I have previously mentioned in this ramble, but I just want to draw your attention to these again. So this is a video over on NoClip2. Of course, NoClip, known for their excellent coverage of first-person shooter games and kind of gaming in general. And this is that video about the Heretic and Hexen remasters that have just dropped from Night Dive as part of QuakeCon. So this talks a bit about the history of the games, and also, of course, covers the remasters in quite a bit of detail, the new improvements and things, and the story behind how they came to be. And there's a bit of information about QuakeCon here as well, and kind of what it's all about, and some of that stuff. It shows some of the kind of LAN party side of it as well. So, yeah, quite a nice little video. This one, 13 minutes and 38 seconds, and if you're at all interested in first-person shooters and in Night Dive and in their remasters and kind of some of the more in-depth information behind those, I can definitely highly recommend this video. I very much enjoyed this morning, and it has whetted my appetite to go and play through Heretic and Hexen once more, which can only be a good thing. So, the next video that I have for you is another one that I have previously mentioned in this ramble, but again, I really kind of urge you to go and check this out. This is the thing that was sent over from Chris in Australia. Tech Distractions is the name of his YouTube channel, and it's 99 Things, the game that he sent over that, of course, you can install on your own hardware or you can play through in a web browser, but if nothing else, there is a very informative and interesting video on his channel, all about how the game came to be, how he built it, how it all works, and of course, as mentioned before, a bit of in-depth technical information about kind of CGA graphics and these older kind of XT class machines and how it all works as well, which is really cool to see. So if nothing else, it's only 5 minutes long, 4 minutes 59 seconds. If nothing else, if you don't have time to go and check out the game, just watch the video. But, you should probably check out the game as well because it is very cool. And the third video that I have for you is one that hasn't been mentioned so far in this ramble, but another one is from a channel that I have recommended before in these videos of the week. It's someone, I'm a huge fan of this guy's work. It's all to do with game preservation, and particularly this one has a link to the Stop Killing Games campaign as well, I will say, because this is a video over on Matt Casey Bytes. So this is Matt Casey's second channel. He's an Australian YouTuber who covers Lego Island predominantly, but he does a lot of reverse engineering of older games and older applications and things. He ported .NET Framework to Windows 95, so you can run quite a lot of modern software on Windows 95 for whatever reason. Done a lot of stuff with the Xbox in the past and kind of hacking that. And this isn't a project that he's personally involved with, but this is a game that I hadn't heard of called Dark Spore, and it was actually a spin-off of Spore, which was absolutely massive at the time. Obviously, I'm very familiar with Spore itself, that kind of, creature creation game that supposedly allowed you to, it had like this whole simulation, evolution simulation thing with these different creatures and things. Will Wright was behind it, of course, Mr. Sim City, as he's known as. So, but yeah, apparently there was a spin-off called Dark Spore, which was like a third-person action RPG dungeon crawler type game. And the trouble with this was that it was pretty much entirely reliant on the servers for a lot of its functionality. Like the enemy AI and stuff was all kind of handled server-side. even though it wasn't, even when playing through it single player. And of course, those servers were taken offline, which is something that has very much been the focus of quite recent news stories about the Stop Killing Games campaign and stuff like that. And of course, when those servers went offline after a few years, nobody could play Darksport anymore. Although, to be fair, I don't think many people were playing it anyway. But the story behind this is really interesting. It's about the guy that kind of started this effort to reverse engineer the game and kind of build his own server for it. And I thought it was a really nice story about him. I won't spoil it for you, but I thought it was a really nice story about what inspired him to actually do this. And then other people getting involved and kind of doing things their own way, porting it, dragging the project in a different direction and then vanishing off the face of the earth, and then other people picking it up. And the whole thing's been quite convoluted and quite interesting, as these kind of, passion projects are. But yeah, the game is actually somewhat playable. So this is kind of a bit of background about the story of how this came about. A bit of information about Darkspore itself, which, like I say, wasn't a game that I was actually familiar with. And also kind of, I guess, raising awareness and asking people in the community if they want to get involved in the effort to bring this game back. So, cool little video, 11 minutes and 2 seconds. That's a sponsor spot. Don't want that kind of thing here, do we? But yeah, Matt Casey is a fantastic storyteller. He very, very much knows the technical side of this stuff as well. So he talks about it with quite some authority, which is always good to hear. And I quite enjoyed this video, if nothing else. So there you go. They are my 3 videos of the week. They will be linked in the usual places, so you can go and check them out. Now, I'm going to wrap up this week's ramble now. I'm not going to transition into another chapter. I've got nothing else to say to you, really, basically. So all I will say is apologies to the people last week who submitted stories over on my Discord who didn't get a shout out. This week's stories were actually a bit thin on the ground, I must say. I think people are out enjoying their holidays and stuff at the moment. But I did get some stuff from Andrew S. and from Technic. And also, of course, from Chris over in Australia, that channel, Tech Distractions, who sent me the information about his game. So thank you to all of those wonderful people and, of course, everyone else who is part of my Discord community. If you want to come and join us, the link is down in the description, but there's certainly no obligation to. You can just email me if you want, like Chris did, or, there's a million and one other ways to contact me, and I'm sure you can dig those up. But that's all I have for you for this week's ramble, so thank you ever so much for joining me once more. Nothing on the main channel this week. As I mentioned earlier, there have been some changes and things to the studio in the past couple of weeks, but they're pretty much there now, and I am up and running again, and hoping, like I say, maybe I'll have a look at that ChromeOS Steam thing before it goes away, because quite intrigued by that, I will say. Anyway, that's all I've got for you, so thank you ever so much once more, and all that's left is to say bye.